Chasing Lincoln's Killer by James L. Swanson. When Booth heard that Lincoln would be joining his wife at Ford's Theater to see Our American Cousin, the actor took this as an advantage. Booth was a well-known and popular actor at the time. He knew Ford's layout well since he performed there often. John Wilkes Booth was quick to plan the assassination, bringing 7 others into the plan with him. Lincoln arrived at the theater at 8:30 p.m. on April 14th with no guards there to protect him. Booth went into Ford's 30 minutes later, and the plan had begun. He had a theater employee hold his horse and was directed under the stage, which led to a saloon where he would have his last drink. When Booth leaves the saloon, he sees Lincoln's carriage outside, and he knows it's time. Back in the theater, he climbs up a staircase to the balcony, following the same path the Lincolns took to the box. Booth arrives at the door and is very surprised when he sees it's unguarded, only a servant there standing nearby. It is still unknown what Booth showed Forbes, but he was not stopped by going into the box. When Booth was inside the box and nothing was between him and Lincoln, Booth closed the outer door, still unnoticed, and wedged a bar tightly in between the wall and the door. He not only locked the Lincolns in, but also himself. Abe sat on the far left, closest to Booth. He was facing the stage, unaware that a killer stood by him. Booth withdrew his .44 caliber Derringer pistol with his right hand and the Rio Grande camp knife with his left. He only had one chance to kill Lincoln. "You suck, dologizing old man trap," Harry Hawk spoke from the stage, followed by laughter from the audience. That is when Booth squeezed the trigger and the bullet was spit at Lincoln's head. The bullet struck him on the back of his head to the lower left side below the ear. The pistol shot stunned people in the audience, but most believed it was just part of the show. Rathbone, a man in the box with Lincoln, lunged for Booth. John Wilkes Booth broke free, his knife held at Rathbone, and cut deep into his arm. His only escape was over the railing, where his spur snagged on a flag before he landed hard on his left leg. He scrambled onto the stage, knowing this would be the performance he would truly be remembered for. "Sic semper tyrannis," Booth shouted into the audience in front of him. "The South is avenged." Booth made his way out of the theater and pulled himself onto his bay mare and galloped away. He rode fast, keeping himself ahead of the news. He convinced Sergeant Silas T. Cobb to let him across the bridge. George Atzerodt, who had been assigned to kill Vice President Johnson, had chickened out and fled, and Powell had failed. David Harold, who had also fled and managed to join up with Booth just beyond the Washington city limits, him and Booth rode out about 10 miles before reaching Surratt's tavern. Mary Surratt had planned with Booth in that she would have the shooting irons ready when she arrived. Booth could not help but brag that they had assassinated the president. Booth met up with Thomas Jones for helping cross the Potomac River. Jones had the two hide in a pine thicket for 4 days because the cavalry were close by. He claimed not to recognize the famous actor and helped him with his injured leg. The papers did not speak of Booth as a hero, but instead they spoke of Lincoln as a hero. Booth wrote in his date book to share his reasons about why he killed Lincoln. On April 20th, Booth and Harold would finally cross the Potomac River, but they end up going the wrong direction and end right back in Maryland. They have to hide for one more night before they can cross again, and they finally make it on Virginia soil on April 23rd. Booth paid Lucas to take him to Port Conway. There they stayed that night at the Garretts. The next night, after seeing how scared the two were of the cavalry, Garrett had them sleep in the barn. He locked them in without them knowing. The next morning, cavalry arrived. Union soldiers surrounded the barn, where the actor insisted to Harold that he would suffer death before giving up. Baker, a soldier, told Booth if he doesn't surrender, they will burn the barn down around him. Harold gave himself up, and though it angered Booth, he let him go. This would be his last performance that would go down in history. Booth decided that it was best to die here than to face justice in Washington, and he stayed in the barn as Conger bent over and lit the straw, bursting it into flame. Corbett poked his revolver into a slit in the wall and shot at Booth. The assassin crumbled to his knees, the bullet passing through his neck and spinal column, leaving him paralyzed. He begged the soldiers to kill him because he was in so much pain, but they wanted him alive. They had no chance, though, and Booth spoke his last words while looking at his hands. Useless, useless. The chase for Abraham Lincoln was over.